Hey, I'm Doug, and welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage, where today we are taking a deep dive with the brand new official JC-120 plugin from Roland, and this thing is awesome. In a moment, we're going to be talking about 5 things I think you're going to want to know about this plugin, but if you just want to get to the demos, each one of them has its own chapter marker link and some descriptive text down below so you can jump to whatever it is you might want to listen to, especially if you're rewatching this. Speaking of which, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't already subscribed to the channel, want to invite you to do so. With that said, let's get to it. Number 1, just like my actual JC-120, the plugin features 2 channels. And at the top there, you heard me using channel 1 for kind of the spanky, funky guitar, pan in the center, and mono. And then channel 2 for that stereo spread, utilizing the stereo chorus on channel 2. Number 2, that is the Boss CE1 chorus ensemble. And in case you didn't know, that's built into the JC-120. And like the actual amp, the plugin is a stereo plugin. When you engage the chorus or the vibrato, one side is dry and the other side is affected. Number 3, interface. In the upper right-hand corner, you've got the infamous hamburger menu that allows you to toggle between full view and control panel view, the view of my preference. Both of those have a little tab at the bottom that allows you to reveal the extended panel. And one of the things you're going to want to know about is your ability to choose the virtual microphone or microphones and where you're going to place them in relationship to the dust cap. Number 4, gain staging. This is super important. Each one of the channels has its own independent volume control as it relates to switching between the 2 channels. But the overall level of the plugin is controlled via the main amp master down on the right-hand side of the expanded panel. In the upper right-hand corner of the interface there, you're going to see a pair of LEDs, one for the input metering and one for the out. When the plugin is operating in mono mode, those will be just kind of one set of LEDs for each one of those. When you're in stereo mode, you're actually going to see 2 sets, so you can monitor any stereo sources going in and out of the plugin. Now, the thing is that you want to make sure that your loudest level when you're playing gently tickles the yellow on the output there. Otherwise, if it goes into the red, you can potentially get digital overages, and that is bad. Number 5, latency. So here's the deal. This is not anything specific to this plugin, but it's something very much worth mentioning at the top of this video, especially for people that are new to recording. I've experienced it for decades, and I've got a great workaround I'm going to talk about after I define what latency actually is. You hit the strings. The signal goes into your audio interface. In turn, that goes into your DAW, where on a track you've instantiated the plugin. You hit the strings, and there's a delay between what you hear coming from the strings and what comes out of the speakers. And that could feel very strange as you're trying to groove along in your track. That can be caused by a couple of things. First of all, it can be caused by having a hardware buffer size that's larger than it needs to be on your computer. It can also be caused by having a lot of tracks and a lot of plugins. So what you can do as a workaround, if you're at a point in your session, you got all these tracks and plugins, and you're like, I don't know what to do. Well, you bounce them to a stereo pair, and then you take all those quote unquote source tracks and you make them inactive, track to the stereo pair. And then when you're ready to start mixing again, you make those tracks active again and mute that stereo pair. It's a great workaround. I've used it for years. All right, the last chapter in this video is Tech Talk. And we're going to be talking more about some of the stuff around latency and also how you take a mono input source like a guitar and run it into a stereo plugin like the JC-120 plugin. All right, with that said, it's time for the demos. So for that one, I was using channel 2 and the stereo chorus. Just love that sound. I was also using the Cooper Time Cube for a stereo delay, dotted eighth on one side, quarter note on the other. Now, of note was how I was using the low input and the distortion. Traditionally, when I've used this amp, I always use the high input because, wait for it, it's louder. However, using the low input completely changes the way the distortion circuit works, which honestly, I've never really liked the way it sounded, but using the low input, I turned it on, I was like, or I should say with the mouse, I turned it on, I was like, I love this. So there was literally set at 50%. I just added a little bit, almost like tube girth to the tone because you could hear it wasn't distorted. It was just better. Love that. So that one really does a great job for me of exemplifying the jazz chorus that makes up the JC-120 name. In case you didn't know, the amp is powered by a stereo pair of 60-watt power amps, hence the 120 part of the JC-120. So here's the thing. There were a number of things happening in that particular demo that I want to unpack, especially for people that are going to be using this plugin a lot. First and foremost, the jazzy tone was channel 1 on the low input. Love that sound. The chorus sound was, no surprise, channel 2, the low input, engaging the chorus. Now, as you toggle back and forth between those two instances of the plugin, you get that great visual feedback. I've never had a plugin do that. You can see which bright switches were engaged and which weren't. Love that. The other thing I want to point out is I was using different mic sets for the two different instances of the plugin. That allowed me to get better separation between the two different guitars. Even though I was using different instruments, which is always great when you're laying two guitar parts, being able to use the different mic sets is a big deal. But there was one other thing that I was doing that I want to tell you about. And we're going to use a little bit of automation magic to demonstrate this. Channel 1 is really mono. Even though it's got a stereo output that you can pan left and right, it's really a mono output. And we're going to demonstrate that with some automation magic. We're going to start off with both pan controls in the center, and then you're going to see them flip off to the hard left and hard right. You're going to notice the audio doesn't change. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a stereo reverb in line after the JC-120 plugin and doing the same automation move. When it's in the center, we're going to have the reverb off. When it splits left and right, we're going to engage the reverb, and you're going to hear that we're now taking advantage of the stereo field. So for the actual demo, I brought the pan controls for the jazzy clean tone into about 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Really, it's not really affecting the direct signal, but it's bringing the reverb in. So the guitar is kind of sitting, if you will, in the center of your focus. And the stereo chorus for the chorus guitar is panned hard left and hard right to the outside. And collectively, that really allows you to kind of focus on what's happening there. The different instruments gives you some separation between the two different parts, as is the different mic sets. Love being able to use this plugin to craft tones like that in the box. So for that one, I was using the vibrato on channel 2. And I had the depth fairly low, so that you only really noticed it on the long notes. And the rest of the time, it was just kind of there hanging out in the background. But for me, the real magic happened in terms of what I was able to do with the volume control, the distortion, and the speaker simulation section. By lowering the volume control, it diminishes the extremity of the distortion, and it begins to behave more and more like an overdrive pedal the lower you set the volume, which was really neat. So I just looped the track, and I kind of found that perfect balance as I adjusted it as the track was playing back, which is one of the conveniences about using a plugin like this. Now, in terms of the speaker simulation section, I was using the U87 mic model, which just warms things up. In terms of the position of the mic, I had it as far away from the center of the dust cap, which also warms things up. And in terms of the distance, I had it set to long, which really, again, adds this kind of space to the sound, which I love. loved having that much control over the sound in so many different ways. And all those things that I mentioned played a role. Now, there's one other thing that I want to bring into the conversation here, which is the reverb that I was using. I was also using the same plugin Deverb on the last track, and that was set to a hall reverb. This time, I was setting on a room reverb with a pre-delay, which gives it almost this kind of blend of slap back delay and reverb. And collectively, I was very happy with what I got. So there, I was basically picking up where I left off with the last demo. I turned the vibrato off, stayed on channel 2, brought up the volume level on channel 2, and also brought up the distortion to compensate for the fact that I was moving from a humbucker to single coils. Now, the other thing is that in the deverb there, I still kept the pre-delay, but I moved over from a room reverb to a hall reverb. Now, the other thing I want to say is at the end there, I backed off with the right hand. I've never had a plugin respond the way this did, where it really kind of responded like a tube amp, and that the way I was driving the gain with my right hand allowed me to clean it up. That touch dynamics, very special, very cool. So when I was done with the last demo, I moved from the number 5 pickup selection down to number 2, and I started playing. I was like, gosh, that sounds like an AC30. I was shocked. Now, once I'd actually recorded, I kind of went back into mix, and I made a couple of changes. Most notably, I moved over to the high input. I brought the volume down, and I brought the distortion down, of course, on channel 2 there. Now, there's one other thing that I failed to mention on the previous demo that I was also doing here. I'm running the plugin in mono, and we'll talk more about that in the Tech Talk section. Moving on. So that time I did something I haven't done on any of the other demos. I started off with one pass. I duplicated that. I panned one instance of the plugin to the left, the other to the right, and I made some subtle changes between the two. I also used something else that I haven't used in any other demos. In the lower right-hand corner of the expanded panel, there is an ambience level control. And for both of those instances of the plugin, I turned that up all the way, and it's kind of imitating the slapback echo on Brown Sugar, which is kind of what I was leaning into, obviously, with that track there. All right, that gets us to the Tech Talk. Like we did earlier in the video, we're going to break the Tech Talk section down into 5 things I think you're going to want to know. For a number of the demos, I was using the plugin in stereo. The challenge is, in Pro Tools at least, the guitar is a mono input source, which means it would only come up on the left-hand side of the plugin. So I had to find a workaround. If you take a look at the channel strip there, I've got the JC-120. It's the second plugin. And up above that, I've bypassed an instance of the deverb in stereo. And so what that enabled me to do is basically use the deverb to take my mono input and split it into stereo in line before we got to the JC-120 plugin. If you're in another DAW and have a similar type of problem, try and find some sort of solution like that. It worked like a charm for me. So I mentioned in the 5 things at the top of the video, latency is an issue that is compounded by the number of tracks and instances of plugins you got up and running. So one of the workarounds that I've used for years is to take all those tracks and bounce them to a stereo pair, and then make those tracks inactive with the exception of the stereo pair, and then track to that. Once you've got that set up, bring the others back online and mute that stereo pair. One of my favorite workflow things about the interface is in the upper right-hand corner, you've got undo and redo buttons. Another great workflow tool is in the upper right-hand corner, you've got the A/B buttons. And that makes it so you can just toggle back and forth between basically 2 presets in one. And just above the A, B buttons, depending on which of the two you have selected, is a copy function. So if you're on A, you can copy those settings over to B. And if you're on B, you got it. You can copy those settings over to A. And that gets us to the end of this video. I want to thank you for hanging out. If by chance you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would like to invite you to do so. Don't forget to ring the bell so I can let you know when more videos are going to go online. For more information about the Roland JC-120 plugin, please visit rolandcloud.com. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.